Today, I'm going to show you how to make a custom UI timer using Verse. You can use this for all sorts of different countdowns, like a boss timer, a vault timer, or really anything you'd like. Also, if you have any tutorial recommendations, make sure to leave them in my Discord, which will be the first link in the description below. But first, let's start about revolutionizing your game development experience with Map Academy. Designed for both beginners and veteran UEFN developers, Map Academy is your ultimate toolkit for creating stunning maps without the headache of complex mechanics. Our comprehensive package offers an extensive collection of both scripts and assets, making your development process smoother and more cost-effective. With Map Academy, you're not just purchasing tools, you're joining a thriving community of developers who share your passion. Need help or have a question? Our support team is always ready to assist. Plus, we offer new scripts every month to keep your projects both fresh and innovative. So why spend countless hours and dollars when you can achieve more with less effort? Check out Map Academy in the description below to embark on your game development journey today. Alright, so to get started, the first thing we need to do is go to your Verse Explorer, right-click on your project name, and hit Add New Verse File to Project. And this, I'm just going to rename this to UI Timer Manager and hit Create. Once this has been created, go ahead and double-click it. This will open up your Verse code. In this, the first thing we need to do is make our custom timer class. So to do this, I'm just going to first delete this and create a new class called Timer. And it's going to be of type class, just like so. So in this timer, the first things we need are all of the UI elements. So that's first going to be a canvas to hold all of them together. I'll call it something like var timer canvas. I'll type canvas is equal to canvas. We'll get an error here as we need to use temporary UI. After we've included this, now the error will go away. Next, we need a text block, which is actually going to display the remaining time. So I'll call this timer text and make this a text block, just like so. Then in this, again, we'll need to use the Fortnite UI, just like so. The next thing we need is the hours, minutes, and seconds the timer is going to have on it. So I'll make a variable, and they're going to be integers. So I'll call this our hours, and it's going to be a type integer. And then we'll just initialize this now as 0, but we'll want to come back and change this later. Now let's go ahead and duplicate this 2 more times, except this one, I'm going to change the name to minutes, and then our last one to seconds. Now I'm also going to include one more thing, which is going to be an image that's going to display with the timer. So I'm actually just going to go back up here, and I'm going to call this our timer image, and it's going to be a texture block. Texture blocks are similar to a text block, except for they're instead used to display an image. But once we do this, we get an error because we need to include our initial member default image. So to do this, you need to write default image, colon equals 2, and then you need to add an image that you've imported. So I'm going to really quick just go back into UEFN, into my content browser, and import an image that I'm going to use. So to do this, you just need to find your PNG, download it, and then drag and drop it into your content browser here. You'll see I have this named UI Portal 2. So to add this into our code now, I'll simply write UI Portal 2. Now we need to create 2 functions inside of this timer class. One to actually control the timer, and the other one to set up the timer canvas. So let's go ahead and do this. The first thing we'll do is set up the timer canvas. So I'll call this setup canvas. It's going to take nothing and return type void. Now inside of this, we want to set up our timer canvas. So I will say set timer canvas equal to canvas. So we're setting our timer canvas equal to a new canvas. And in this canvas, we want to add both our text and our image. So to do this, we'll write slots is equal to an array. And in this array, we'll add our first canvas slot. Now, the first thing that we 100% will need is our widget. So say our widget is equal to, this one will be for the text. And then I'll duplicate this and make another one just like so. And this one will be for our image. So we're going to need more values in this so we can actually specify where we want this text and this image. So let's go ahead and actually minimize our VS Code for now. Go back to our content browser and set up a test UI widget so that we can find the values that we'll need to add into our code. So to do this, right click, go to user interface and hit widget blueprint. Then create a user widget. Here I'm going to name this our test UI widget and then open it up. With this full screen, the first thing that we'll need is a canvas panel. This is going to represent the player's screen. This is going to be the player's UI, but our timer widget is going to have its own canvas panel inside of this that we're later going to place on this UI. So we'll drag another canvas panel onto the screen. And in this canvas panel, we have a text block as well as a texture block or an image. So if we go back, first we need an image. So this is going to be our portal. So let's go ahead and change the image. So I'm going to drop down brush. Before I select the image here, I want to say that I did change out the image from earlier because the previous image I had imported had some strange issues with it. So instead now I just need to change this to Vault PNG, which is the new name for this image. But anyway, let's go back to our widget. In the image here, we will select our texture. And then we want to scale this to the size we want. But first, I'm just going to change the anchors. So it's anchored to the center of this canvas. And then I'm going to position it. So right here looks good to me. Then our other thing that we need is a text block. So I'll drag this into our canvas panel here. Position this where I want. I'll also change the anchors. So this is where our timer is going to be. But then we also want to now select our main canvas panel and position this where we want it. So I'll change the anchors to, actually I'll change it to the right side. And then I want my timer to be right over here on the player's UI. So now with this created, we can now start importing these values and creating this UI in our VS Code. So let's open this up. The first thing we're going to do is the timer text. So if we select our text block, our anchors are going to be center. So to add that, you'll write anchors, and this is going to be equal to anchors, where our minimum is equal to a vector 2, where our x is equal to 0.5, because that'll be the center for the x, and then our y is also equal to 0.5, so that's the center. Here we are missing something because we need to include spatial math, so let's go ahead and do that real quick by copying this and pasting it up here. Now let's add our maximums, so I'll add a comma here and say our maximum is equal to, and we want it to be the exact same thing, so I'll just copy and paste this. Now let's go back to our widget blueprint. The next values are going to be our position X, position Y, size X, and size Y. So to add this, we'll add our offset, and it's going to be equal to a margin. We got an error because I believe it should be offsets. Yep. Our first value, which is going to be the position X, is going to be left. So I will say left is equal to negative 81. So left is equal to negative 81.0. The next value, which is going to be our position Y, which is 37, that is going to be the top value. So our top is equal to 37. Next up, we have our size X, which is 165, and our size Y, which is 40. So if we go back, our size X is going to be the right value, so that's equal to 165. And then lastly, our size Y, which is going to be the bottom value, which was 40. Now the next value we need, if we go back to our widget, is our alignment, which is equal to 0, 0. So let's add that. Our alignment is equal to a vector 2, where our x is equal to 0.0 and our y is equal to 0.0. Lastly, I'll do the z order. So our z order here is 0. Then we also need the size to content. So let's actually do size to content first. So size to content, and that's either going to be true or false. Here it'll be false for us. And then last, z order, which we'll have as 1. So this is going to be the order or the layer it's displayed on the UI, and we'll want it above the image. So we'll have this as 1 and our timer image as 0. That's our timer text done. So let's actually go ahead and copy everything except for the widget and paste it under here for our timer image. And then let's go ahead and change the values we need. So if we go back and we select our image now, our position X is -77, our position Y is -102. So let's add that. Our left is -77, our top is -102. Then our size X is 164 and our size Y is 130. So 160, we can keep that about the same. Then lastly, change this to 130. Our lines are the same. The only thing that we'll need to change now is the Z order to 0. So this will set up our timer canvas to be correct, but now we actually need to apply that to the player UI. So let's go ahead and do that. First, in our main creative device class, we'll want to, at the start, which is underneath on begin, so whenever the game starts, we want to first go through every player in the play space. So to do that, we'll do a loop. So for every single player in get play space dot get players, I believe this P needs to be capitalized, and then at the end of this you need a colon. So now for every single player in the play space, we want to initialize the timer for that player. Obviously, initialize timer doesn't exist yet, so we'll have to create that. But before we do that, I also want to accommodate for players who join the game after the game has already started. So to do that, we will say get play space dot player added event dot subscribe to this initialize timer function. Now let's go ahead and create this function. So we will call it initialize timer. It's going to take an agent and it's going to return nothing. Now underneath this, we'll want to create a new timer for that player. Create a new variable called new timer, and it's going to be of type timer and equal to a timer. And now for this new timer, we want to add the timer canvas after we set it up. So first, let's go ahead and set up the canvas. So for this new timer, we'll say new timer dot set up canvas. So now this new timer that we just created is fully set up, or the canvas is. And then we want to add this canvas to the player UI. So to do this, we will say if player is equal to player agent. What this does is converts the previous agent into a player. The reason we need to do this is because you have to get the player so you can get the player UI. So we will make a new variable called player UI, and that's going. And then to get this player UI, you use the function get player UI, and you use it for our player that we just got, just like so. Okay, so now that we have the player UI, we need to actually add the widget. So to do this, we'll say player UI dot add widget. And then we want to add our new timers timer canvas. So new timer.timer canvas. But this does not work, as we actually need to assign a position for this canvas. So instead of just adding the canvas like this, so instead we need to create a new canvas. So new player canvas, and that's going to be of type canvas equal to a new canvas. In this, we need to do the same as we did before. So slots is equal to array and create a new canvas slot. And this, our widget, is actually going to be the canvas from our timer. So we will now say new timer, or sorry, we'll put it after the widget. So new timer dot timer canvas. So we'll just copy this just like so. Now the reason we get an error here is because we need to shift tab this. And then we need to add all of our anchors and everything else for the canvas slots. So let's go ahead and duplicate that, except for we need to change the values. So this is going to be the canvas slot for our timer. Our anchors are here on the right middle side. So that will be X as 1.0 and Y is still 0.5. Let's go ahead and add that. And now if we go back, you'll see our position X is -260. Our position Y is -170. So let's change left to 260, top to -170. And then our size X is 210 and size Y is 160. So size X is 210 and size Y is 160. The Z order here doesn't really matter, but I'll just leave it as 1. Okay, so now if we actually load into our game, the UI is going to be added to the player in the correct position. But the timer isn't actually working yet because it's not counting down. So now let's go ahead and make a function that's going to count the timer down. So we will call this function handle timer. And we want this function to suspend because we'll need to have a loop in it. And then we don't want it to return anything, so it's going to be .void. And inside of this, the first thing we need is a loop that's going to sleep for 1 second because we want the timer to change every 1 second. So now every single second in this timer, the first thing we need to do is decrease our seconds by 1. So we'll say, we will say set our seconds minus equal to 1, so that our seconds is getting decreased by 1 every second. After we decrease the seconds by 1, we need to check where seconds is at. So we will see if seconds is less than or equal to 0. So if seconds is less than or equal to 0, the next thing we want to do is check if our minutes is less than or equal to 0. So if minutes is less than or equal to 0, and if minutes is less than or equal to 0, then we want to check if hours is less than or equal to 0. So if hours is less than or equal to 0, then here we want to break the function. So if seconds, minutes, and hours are less than or equal to 0, then we want to stop the loop. But now we need our else statements for each of these. So if if seconds is less than or equal to 0, but minutes is not less than or equal to 0, so we will add an else statement in line with our minutes if statement. Then we want to set our minutes minus equal to 1, and we want to reset our seconds back to 60. And then it's the same thing for the hours. So we'll add an else statement in line with the hours here. So if seconds is 0 and minutes is 0, if hours is not 0, we want to set hours minus equal to 1, then set our minutes equal to 59, and set our seconds equal to 60. Then the last thing we need to do is just actually set the text to our text widget here. So to do this, we will say timer text dot set text, just like so. Unfortunately, we can't just add our numbers here, like seconds, for example. We'll need to make a function that converts a string to a message. So to do this, we'll call this string to message, and this will localize just like so. And then inside of this, we want it to receive a string. So we'll say string of type string, and we want this to return a type message. And the message that we want it to return is going to be our string. And we need to add an S here because this is localizes rather than localize. Now with this function created, instead of in our setText function down here, we'll add the string to message function. And inside of this, we'll create our string for our timer. So the first thing we want to display is the hours. So I'll just write our hours here. And then add a colon and display our minutes. And then add another colon and display our seconds. So now let's actually assign how much time we want in the timer. So let's say we want 30 seconds and 5 minutes. Actually, let's change this to, let's say 15 seconds instead. Now all we need to do is actually call this function whenever we initialize this timer. So right after it sets up the canvas and adds the canvas, we will say new timer dot handle timer. But this suspends, so we need to actually spawn this just like so. Now let's go ahead and go back into our game. We can close out of this widget now. Hit verse, build verse code. Then go down here, drag this UI timer manager into the play space. There's nothing that we actually need to fill out, so we can go ahead and launch session. So now whenever I start the game, you'll see our image appears, and we also have our text, which is counting down. If we wait for this timer to hit 0, you'll see it resets and our 4 goes down. But there's still a few things that we're going to need to do to make sure this timer is working as intended. So let's go ahead and end the game. Back in our verse code, we actually need to do something other than just breaking this widget whenever it ends. So whenever this timer ends, we want to remove the widget from the player. So to do this, the first thing we actually need to do is send the player to this handle timer function. So it will make it receive an agent. And then down here, when we call it, we'll want to send it the agent that it's getting applied to. So now let's go ahead and copy right here how we got the player UI and just add it to the start of this function so that we can use the player UI throughout the entire thing. Now what we need to do is, before we break the function, is get our player UI, and then we need to remove the widget, which is the widget of this timer, which is our timer canvas. Then I also want this to trigger a trigger whenever the timer completes. So let's go into our main creative device and first just go ahead and create an editable trigger just like so, which is equal to a trigger device. And then we also want to create a variable trigger inside of our timer class up here. So I will just make a variable and then paste what we've already created. Now down here, we need to assign the trigger in this class to the trigger editable that we created. So whenever we create a new timer, all you need to do is write trigger, which is equal to the trigger. So the trigger in the class is equal to the editable trigger that's in our creative device. Then all we need to do is go down here and write trigger.trigger for our player or our agent. The next thing I want to do is add zeros. So let's say if there's 1 hour remaining, it'll display as 01 rather than just a simple 1. So to do this, I'm actually just going to, before the loop starts, I'm going to make 3 variables, which is going to be our hours zeros, which is a string, and we'll just set it blank for now. And I will duplicate this twice, so we need our minutes zeros and our seconds zeros. Now we want to apply this in our string here, so I will add that here, just like so. And then we want to do this twice more for the minutes zeros, as well as the seconds zeros. Make sure to assign the correct variable though. Also, I added two S's here, so I'll just go ahead and fix that. But right now these strings are empty, so when I actually change anything, what we need to do is, before we set the text here, we will want to have some more logic that will assign these zeros. So we will check if hours is less than 10, then we will set hours zeros equal to just a simple 0, like so. And then we want to do this twice more for both minutes and seconds. So if I just duplicate this twice and fix the alignment, then I'll change minutes and seconds. And then you also want to change the zeros that it's affecting. So minutes zeros and second zeros. But we also need else statements for all of these. So I will say else set hour zeros equal to nothing again. So this will reset it if it's above 10. So let's go ahead and add that for all three of them by just duplicating what we've already done and just changing the names for the variables. Now there's one more thing that I want to do, and that's end this loop if the player leaves before the timer completes. So instead of just looping, I'm going to make a race, then go down here and hit tab on everything, just like so. Then I need to add a block with another loop. And here we need to get the play space and activate this every single time there is a player who leaves. So we'll get the player removed event, and then we will await it. The issue here is that we can't get the play space without our device. So to fix that, we'll get our device. So we will make a variable that is going to be the timer device, and it's going to be the name of our creative device. So it'll be this right here that we will add just like so. And then we actually need to assign this to something. So if I go down here, and when we assign the trigger, I'm also going to assign the device. This is not correct though. We need to have the name here. So our timer device is equal to, we can't add the UI timer manager. Instead, you need to write self so that it references itself. Then back up here, now instead of just doing get play space, we need to do our timer device dot get play space. But we don't want to just end this timer every single time a player leaves. We only want to end this timer if the player who left is equal to our player that started this timer. So I'll just say leaving player is equal to, so this will get the player who left, and then we'll check if our leaving player is equal to our agent. Then we'll break this loop, which will then actually end everything else as well. So now let's go ahead and test this. I'm going to just change this to 1 minute now. Before I test this out in game, there's one more thing that I need to change. So here, whenever we remove the timer canvas, it won't actually work because our timer canvas isn't what's getting added to the player UI, it's the new player canvas. So the easiest way to fix this is actually first, let's go ahead and press tab on this so that it's underneath where we created this new canvas. And then whenever we call this function, we also want to send it the canvas that gets added to the player. Then if we go back up here, on top of taking in an agent, we need to take in a canvas. So we'll say like player canvas, and it's going to be of type canvas. Then just down here, instead of removing the timer canvas, we'll remove the player's canvas. Minimize this, just hit verse, build verse code. The one thing we do need is a trigger, so I'll search for a trigger device and then drag it into the play space. Then I can just select that here in my device. Now let's push changes and see what the timer looks like now. All right, now in game, you'll see we have all of the zeros. Now I'm going to wait for this timer to complete and we'll see what happens. So when the timer hits 0, you'll see the UI gets removed and the trigger gets triggered. And that's everything you know to set up a UI timer in Verse. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more tutorials just like this. Also, if you have any tutorial recommendations, make sure to leave them in my Discord, which will be the first link in the description below. Also, don't forget to check out Map Academy. Anyways, I'll catch you guys in the next one.